So Elizabeth Warren released her Medicare for All plan after being pressured by Pete Buttigieg and Joe Biden and others for how she's going to pay for it. And honestly, some of the proposals that she's making for paying for it is kind of crazy. As far as the employer head tax, it gives an advantage to large corporations because obviously they'd be able to afford a higher payroll tax. And in effect, you are taxing people without technically saying you're taxing people. So, I mean, but beyond the problems of her bill, which we're going to get back to, we'll top this conversation off with that. I have to talk about this in a broader sense because the fact of the matter is most Americans aren't going to look into the details of this bill.
Definitely not.
Like, let's be real. And so now, not only have you come out with a wordy bill that, I mean, Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All resonates so hard because it's like Medicare for All. And you say three simple things that everybody can understand and appreciate. No co-payments, no premiums, and no deductibles. I mean, literally, the most effective messaging on Medicare is that. Not Medicare for all who want it, not this, that, and the other, and not Elizabeth Warren's version of Medicare for all. And the thing about Elizabeth Warren now is this is the second time she has been goaded by her opponents into doing something that she never wanted to do to begin with. It started with Donald Trump calling her Pocahontas, and she ended up, releasing these DNA results that she should have never taken. And in the most cringy video I've ever seen in my life, she's sitting there and talking with the DNA expert, and he's telling her, yeah, it does turn out you have some Native American blood. It's like 1/1024th of Native American blood in her system. And it's like, you're not vindicating yourself. Even if it came back that you were 51% Native American, you're not vindicating yourself because that's not the point of this. The point is to get you to have a reaction, period, because it keeps Trump in the headline. The same thing for this Medicare for All. Pete Buttigieg does it. First of all, back in February of last year, and I believe at the beginning of this campaign cycle, Pete Buttigieg was for Medicare for All and Bernie Sanders' version of the bill. He is getting more money than anybody from executives of health insurance and pharmaceutical companies. So if you want to know what corruption means in our political process and what money means in our political process, Pete Buttigieg, who's taking more money than anybody from health insurance executives and pharmaceutical executives, has now changed his tune from, I'm 100% for Medicare for all in the way that Bernie Sanders is describing it to now, you know what, we can't do it. We're going to do a public option, which again, as stated before, is a huge wet kiss to the health insurance industry and the pharmaceutical industry. And Warren allows him to call her out on Medicare for all. And her bill costs more than Bernie Sanders' bill. Is $50 trillion in comparison to $32 trillion. And yes, that's a lot of money on both ends, but I do need to be 100% clear here that over the next 10 years, we're projected to spend more than both of those proposals anyway on our current healthcare system. So when people say, how can we afford single payer healthcare? We can barely afford this system that we have now, and we're not even top 10 in the world as far as quality outcome of healthcare. So this is a problem to me, though, because she's going to get into the general. And while I do think that she has what it takes to beat Donald Trump as far as policy goes, as far as the wonkiness goes, that professor attitude of I'm going to beat you over the head with details, she's too easily pulled into a mud fight with him. And she's too easily pulled up into a mud fight with Pete Buttigieg and with Joe Biden and all this other stuff. Instead of just saying it straight up, like Bernie Sanders says, yeah, you're going to pay more in taxes. I'm not going to lie to you about it. You will pay more in taxes. What you get in exchange for the taxes is the important part, which is you get quality, comprehensive health care that covers your dental, it covers vision, it covers hearing, it covers everything you need other than vanity surgeries. It covers everything you need and no out-of-pocket expenses. And you will no longer have co-payments, deductibles, and premiums. Instead of staying on message for that one, she falls for the Okie Doke and she releases this wordy Medicare for all proposal, which is very shady as far as the transition time is concerned. Now, Representative Pramila Jayapal came out and said that she spoke to Warren and that it's still a 4-year transition period, in similar ways to Bernie's bill. But even still, this is just, to me, a disastrous move for Elizabeth Warren. And it makes me question whether or not she can handle a general election.
She can't handle it because she can't. See, you have to have a moral high ground as to when to respond and who to respond to.
Exactly.
I'm not responding to somebody that's polling at 2%. Like, I'm just not. You're
or
beneath
someone
me.
with 0% in the black polls.
Exactly. Like, you gain nothing from responding to that. And all you did was make yourself a larger target, and you gave them something to poke holes in. If you didn't give them anything, they can't nitpick your plan.
Exactly.
Now, as you stated, that the taxes will be slightly higher, but over time the taxes will decrease because if, say, Bernie is elected and he actually gets to tax the top 1% at the rate that he wants to, which is what was like 50% or something like that.
Yeah.
Like you get that, and then it'll eventually decrease. But if you go in for a monthly checkup and then you add up what you're spending for your co-pays, and you factor it into what the taxes will increase to, is not that big of a difference. You only getting you're only paying an extra few $100s, but you're not getting the same level of service that you would with your insurance, because the insurance has so many loopholes as far as your out-of-pocket expenses, as far as what's covered and what's not. Like, if you really read what's in your insurance and what's covered and what's not, you will be for Medicare for all, because as you said, it's anything that's not cosmetic.
Exactly.
And I think it's still some
vanity
things.
Surgery, actually.
Yeah. Vanity surgery.
If you're just someone who
things.
just wants to get, like, lip injections or Botox or something like that, just for the sake of looking the way you want to look, Medicare fraud is not going to cover that.
Right, but it will cover some cosmetic surgeries, as far as like cleft palates, and if you were in an accident or something like that, it's certain things.
Soldiers, that might come back without a limb or something like that.
Yeah, it'll cover all of that stuff. So you're getting far more forward. But as we said earlier, the only one that can go toe to toe with Trump is Bernie, because I don't think that Elizabeth can remain composed on the stage with Trump. I think Joe Biden will fall asleep, or he might just say something.
What's going to happen, and this needs to be said, because presidential debates matter so much more than primary debates do, because so many more people are watching. And what's going to happen is Joe's going to go off on one of those tangents where he keeps cutting himself off because, he can't remember what he was going to say. And Trump is just going to hit him with one of those damn one-liners. There he goes, folks. Sleepy Joe. This is
Joe
the man that you want to become president.
Overtly racist, which he's known to do. Like he says things that are mildly racist. And you can't do that on a national stage. And you can't.
And especially when we're talking about something that is healthcare, which when it comes to healthcare, it is an extremely complex, nuanced conversation to have. Like, healthcare is not something that is just, even for a Medicare for all from Bernie's proposal, it's not something as simple as like, okay, we're just going to go in and do this. And this is an important part to take away, and why Elizabeth Warren made the mistake of releasing the details of her proposal to begin with. When it comes to presidential platforms, what people have to understand is that the agendas that these candidates are presenting is not going to be everything that you want once it comes and gets codified in the law. And the reason why is because the president does not have unilateral power to just say, okay, I want Medicare for all exactly how I wrote it out, and this is how it's going to be.
System of checks and balances.
Exactly. So it's going to go into Congress, and Congress is then going to negotiate with the president on what's coming into this bill and what's coming out of it. So for Bernie Sanders, he said, yeah, I'm going to give you a menu option of how we're going to pay for Medicare for all for $32 trillion over a 10-year period. That's the way to go about it, because he's going to give Congress the options of, okay, you want to pay for it this way, that way, or a combination of ways. Versus Warren, who's saying, no, this is how we're going to pay for it now. And in the long run, that would be a short-term gain if she were to pass a law that was, verbatim what she wrote down. But the problem is that in the long term, you're punishing small businesses and you're creating an enormous gap that's not going to be able to sustain your version of Medicare for all. It's not sustainable. Bernie Sanders' plan was researched by a Koch brothers funded research company. And if you know anything about the Koch brothers, the reason why the Republican Party is the way it is because of the Koch brothers and the candidates that they supported as far as the Tea Party goes and things like that. But when they conducted their research on the Medicare for All proposal from Bernie Sanders, what they ended up finding was that the $32 trillion that we'll spend over a 10-year period saves us about $1.8 trillion a year over a 10-year period. So if there's any study that was ever going to come out to try to debunk Medicare for All by saying it's way too expensive and we'll never be able to have it, it's that. And yet and still that did not come to be. And so when we talk about Elizabeth Warren's Medicare for All, we're talking about $50 trillion. That's a hard pill to swallow. That's a hard pill to swallow. And I don't know if she's doing this to, like, at this point promote Bernie, or she's just becoming a caricature of herself. Because it's like, you have a plan for everything. You should have never ran on that to begin with, because eventually someone's going to be like, Joe, what's your plan for this? And then when you come out with it, they're going to be like, thanks, now I can pick you apart in the next debate. And it's just a ridiculous thing to do. And this is the problem that I have with presidential politics sometimes. Is that instead of just saying, you know what, this person had a good policy proposal, I'm going to sign on to that because I think that's a good idea. Everybody has to come out with their own version of everything. And it gets ridiculous at some point in time. It gets to the point where it's just like, you've just made this more complicated than it needs to be. And this is what Elizabeth Warren has contributed now to the Medicare for All conversation, is now people are no longer going to look at Bernie's plan, which now looks like a bargain compared to $50 trillion. They're going to look at that $50 trillion and say, see, Medicare for All costs too much. Now they're going to acknowledge how much we pay for healthcare and say, oh, we're already on $50 trillion. Why should we go to her $50 trillion? It's not even going to pass Congress.
Then she handed the Republican Party their biggest sticking point that they've always used is the Democrats always increase the deficit. The Democrats always
exactly.
The Democrats. And it's like, dude, come on. Like you handing this to them. Like, if you get the nod, you can't use this plan because that plan in itself is going to be your downfall.
It is.
Like it.
There's no way you can stomach. Like, you can stomach $32 trillion because you can say, hey, that's $18 trillion less than what we're going to be paying anyway, so we might as well do it. You can't stomach $50 trillion versus $50 trillion. That does not motivate people to come out. And, the problem is that she wants to be so different from Bernie Sanders, and she doesn't need to be. You clearly have your own lane, and I understand it's not the same base as Bernie's base. Hers is more affluent, college-educated white. She doesn't have very great support among the African-American community.
No.
But in an effort to make yourself so different, in an effort to stand out so much, you might have just cost yourself the nominee.
Right.
The nomination. And this is not a help for the Medicare for All discussion. This is something that Biden and Buttigieg are going to continue to use to attack Medicare for All. It is something that they're going to use to drive down support for Medicare for All, for enthusiasm for it. And, but at the same time, I have to say that it helps Bernie out. Because now Bernie gets to look at her plan and the standard plans and say, hey, mine is like $18 trillion less than all these dudes.
And it gives you more. Like, hers is the same. It's what we're spending, and you're not getting much more.
Right.
Like, why would you change? Like, if I'm not getting anything different, why would I change?
And the transition period thing is another one. Like, just come out and say, okay, it's going to be a 4-year transition period, or somehow Kamala Harris's team a month or so ago came out and said, yeah, we're going to have a 10-year transition period for Medicare for All, which is obviously insane and unworkable. But
Kamala's plans are absolutely ludicrous. And
she doesn't have any support anymore because people are racist and sexist. But when she was polling at 20%, she was still a black woman. So I don't know.
Again, it's the age of information. When
exactly.
Your history will come back. And at some point, somebody is going to throw it all out there.
Yep.